voice those things. And if I was just to ask questions, what are your two greatest strengths? What are your two greatest weaknesses? You'd have some floating around in your head. But when you write them down, it becomes much clearer. And then when you have to express them, it becomes much clearer. And likewise, just a side note, in our midweeks or whatever we're doing, D groups, the more interactive we can get people getting about stuff like that and expressing things, the more conviction they're really going to gain. But anyway, I hope that's helpful, and I hope you kind of identified some things, and now you know, okay, this is what I want to grow in. So you look at your areas of strength, and you want to fan those into flame. You don't want to stop developing those. Those are your innate or learned strengths that you go, great, you got them, work them. I mean, go with that more and more, but then knowing your weaknesses, you can focus on those, and by faith, turn those weaknesses to strength. Come to a workshop like this, or go to a conference or something, thinking, I want to grow in this, so I'm going to look at speakers who are better than me in this area, and I'm going to imitate them. I'm going to watch them. That's what I like to do before I go to a conference is, I like to get the general, all the lessons, but I like to think, what do I want to learn, and who do I want to learn it from? For example, recently I went to a conference, and I really wanted to see how a couple people that I really admire handle conflict and handle crucial conversations, like difficult conflicts. Because sometimes I can get emotionally hooked in a conversation. Like I was telling this to James the other night, and I can derail, and I become the focus rather than the helper. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. When I go to a conference, I go, I'm going to watch Doug Arthur, how he handles this, John Louis, how they handle these conflicts, and I just go, I'm going to learn from those guys. Yeah. You can do that with preaching. Who is good at the areas that you want to excel in? Watch them, and you have your own personal seminar that's kind of catered just to you, and you get so much more out of it than everybody that's just bebopping around classes. So I hope identifying that has really helped you. Again, whether you're preparing a sermon, a class, a devotional, a communion, a welcome, a testimony, a Bible talk, a D group, all the things that we're going to go through in the remainder of this workshop can apply to that. Let's go into Roman numeral 2. Elements of lesson preparation. Now, what we're going to do here is kind of like Ed referenced earlier. We're going to focus on some really foundational principles as related primarily to topical preaching first. But then in the latter parts, we're going to apply it to expository preaching as well. But the foundational patterns are the same for both. So that's what we want to kind of instill in there, is lay this foundation, then we can apply it to expository preaching. Some of this, as you can see in your notes there, will sound super basic. Like you go, I already know this. I learned this in 5th grade or something, outlining and so forth. Some of it's going to sound super cumbersome and unnecessary. But you go, okay, I can shortcut that. I can shortcut that. And I understand that. I can as well. But I'll tell you, very few in our fellowship develop their sermons well.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Now, I'm not saying they're not great preachers. I'm not saying God doesn't work incredibly. I get so fed. I love the preaching in our fellowship. But I'm telling you, very few in our fellowship really develop their sermons well. Like, we would do very well to go through some basic courses in preaching and teaching. I don't mean that arrogantly so at all. I think we're all just constantly learning. But master this stuff, and you'll have a foundation to be an extremely effective communicator for years to come, regardless of your talent level. Right. We all have a certain talent level, and that's awesome. But you don't want that to cap you. You want to be able to learn foundational things that can make you better. Yeah. Or if you go, man, I'm really talented. Okay, that can be awesome. But sometimes you go, you could be so much better if you didn't rely on that talent, if you knew some really good techniques and tactics to building a great sermon. Blow it off and you're just going to stay the same. And hey, I've gone to classes and workshops and stuff where I go, yeah, that's awesome, and then you stay the same. Okay, so you can do that. You have the choice to do that. But I think if you really pour yourself into it, it's going to help you get to the next level. You can certainly develop your own style, and you have to. We're all different. I love that about our fellowship. I love that when we switched away from uniformity to unity. I didn't like the years that every place sang the same songs and did the same style preaching and everything else. It was reproducible, and that was good, but it kept us at one level. But now that we're kind of free to do different things according to our different personalities and talents and freedoms, we can learn from each other in a great way. You can develop your own style, and you have to, your own preaching style. But having the basic foundation of development and organization is crucial to reaching your full potential and developing your own style. This helps ensure consistently solid preaching year after year. Have you ever seen somebody, maybe you've been that person, that sometimes they hit it out of the park and you're like, gosh, that was an incredible sermon. And then there's other times you're like, dude, what happened? Like really up and down. Typically that shows they have the ability, they have the talent, but they haven't developed the foundational formulation of how to develop it, so they don't know in advance whether it's going to be good or not. If there were certain techniques and foundation and form that was so rock solid, yeah, there's going to be little, this was more awesome, this is a triple, that was a home run, but it's really not going to fluctuate. It really reveals a lack of foundational formulation and structure and development when you're just so up and down like that. It's like, didn't Danny do an awesome job earlier? I'm like, gosh, all those stories. I'm like, what can't you do? Hypnotize us, entertain us, choreograph us. Gosh, I guess he can't do golf. Okay, that was one thing. But like a swing in golf. If you've ever taken up golf, you can get out there and just kind of hack. But if somebody sits down with you and tells you how to do your grip and interlock your fingers and address the ball and keep your back straight, your head solid, and they teach you those things, it makes all the difference. For me, I grew up doing a lot of karate, and the form, literally, that's what they call it, the forms. Just to go through your forms over and over, over and over, over and over. Thousands and thousands of times you're doing a form that's been passed down for hundreds and hundreds of years, that people all over have done. I remember I took a really traditional Okinawan style called Shirinji, and I had this opportunity to go over to Okinawa. We had a retreat in Okinawa, and I stood on these cliffs and I'm doing my forms that came from Okinawa. And I thought, how cool is that? And it's like, it's the same. There was a sister in the Tokyo church that I was telling her I studied Shirinji. She said, I studied Shirinji and competed in national games and stuff through a translator. She's Japanese. And then we went out in the street outside of Frank and Erica Kim's house. She helped them, assisted them at their house. And then we did our forms, and we couldn't talk, and she couldn't speak English, but we did the exact same form. It was like speaking a language. It was really cool, but in karate, form is everything. Yeah. Because once the emotions, the fight's going, it comes down to form. Archery, it's the same. It's form. You have to have a rock solid form. You got the form down. Then when the excitement comes, your heart's beating, here comes a big elk or something like that. It's just instinctive. You got to have the form. It's the same in preaching. You got to have the form. It's not just getting up there and kind of preaching the word and winging it. It's really having a form to develop your content extremely well. You have this solid foundation. So I want to go through several practicals to help you have this solid foundation of form. A, invest your time. Invest your time. Nothing impacts more people in less time than preaching. Nothing that you do. There's nothing you do in the ministry that impacts more people in less time than preaching. Biggest bang for your buck. Number one. There's nothing even remotely close. I remember hearing this from Phil Slade, our preaching professor at Harding Graduate School way back in the day. You have an audience of 300 people. You preach for 30 minutes, which is a good goal, for a typical Sunday sermon, 30 minutes. And you go, that's 150 total man hours being devoted to you in an undivided fashion. 150 man hours. That's about, based on how, your schedule as a minister, that's about 3 weeks of appointments. Not counting driving or anything like that. 3 weeks of appointments are just being devoted to you in 1/2 hour. How much preparation time is that worth to you? Think of it this way. God's perfect word is made either appealing and impacting or boring and dull based on your preaching. How much preparation is that worth to you? You're literally defining how people are going to view God's word in your preaching. I remember, growing up in a Catholic church, and we go to church and the preacher would just talk like this, and we're going to give this morning. And I thought, oh my God, I just didn't get it. I literally didn't get it. Sometimes in Latin, I'm like, I don't understand what dude is saying at all. I'm like, shut up. It just made no sense. Every once in a while, my dad would go, John's not feeling good. I'm like, I'm fine. And silence me. He'd take me out because he just wanted to get out of there. I was his excuse to getting out. Kind of like we do with our wives. I want to get my wife home. Yeah, you want to watch Sports Center, Sometimes we do that, That's what my dad would do with me to get out of church. But I would listen to this priest up there, and it literally meant nothing to me. Then I remember, for years I became an atheist. I didn't go to church. Then I went to church many years later at LSU, and I heard Barry Beatty. Anybody know Barry Beatty?
Oh, yeah.
Barry Beatty did the lesson that day. And I went in, and I remember hearing what he said, and I remember going, I would never want to be a preacher, but if I were, I'd want to be like that guy. Because he was fun and relatable and impacting, and it stirred me. And I just thought, wow, it really got me interested in the Word for the first time. These years of growing up created atheism in me. One time of hearing Barry Beatty made me interested in the Word of God.
Come on.
That's the power you have. How much preparation is that worth to you? Another thought on this note, the impression of an event, like a devotional, a midweek, a Sunday, is based largely on the preaching. For both the disciples to be confident and enthusiastic about bringing people, and for the guests to come back. So both for the disciples and the guests, the impression of the event, its worthiness, is based primarily on the preaching. How much preparation is that worth to you? Now, I know the warmth of the service makes a difference. I know the worship of the service makes a difference. Even the location sometimes makes a difference. But when people really, the time they're really focused is the preaching. And when the Christians know it's going to be awesome. I'm telling you, there is a natural vigor to share their faith and bring people to it. I mean, do you have to challenge people to go tell people when they like a movie to tell their friends about it?
Nope.
Do you have to challenge people when they like a restaurant to go tell people about it?
No.
I'm a big writer on TripAdvisor. I like writing on TripAdvisor. And so whenever I go to a restaurant, I'm at this hotel, I go, oh good, I get to write something on TripAdvisor. And they give me all kinds of badges. They pull me in. They're like, do you know how many people have read your reviews? I'm like, no, but I'd like to. And 30,000 I'm up to. I'm like, this is awesome. You're changing the world through TripAdvisor. Anyway, but I like telling people about something I like. It's natural. So do your people. When they really like the preaching, when they know their friends are going to like it, there's a natural evangelism that's not just because they need to share their faith. They go, you're going to love this guy. You're going to love the sermon. It's going to really help you. It just taps into this natural thing. And then the Christian, or the visitors who come, the guests are going to go, this was awesome. This man told me everything I ever did. Wow, this really resonated. I want to come back to this. And this cool example of this doesn't happen all the time, but earlier, it was last year, this guy comes into church, and actually I took over this region for a while, and I had to preach in this one region because we had kind of a challenge in there. And I went and did the communion for the child care people first, which, it's a cool thing if you don't do that. Most of you probably do that, and I do that occasionally. So I did that, and then I came out of the child care before church, and there's this family standing there. And they're just standing there. I said, hey, my name's John. He said, hey, my name's Martine. This is my wife Paula and his brother. And I said, I haven't seen you before. He said, no, this is my first time here. He said, I've been looking for a new church, and I wanted to listen. I listened online to all the different sermons of churches in this area. And I liked yours the most, and I wanted to come hear you. So I walked into church, and I could hear your voice doing the communion in this room because the door was closed. And so then I walked out, and there he is. Well, he became a Christian like about a month later. I saw him at a marriage retreat this last weekend. He's like, hey, John, but it was just like from listening online that he's like, I want to go to that church. That's how guests feel based on your church, the tenor of your church, the identity of your church. It's largely defined by your preaching. How much time in preparation is that worth to you? The number one weakness in preaching in our fellowship is insufficient preparation. The number one weakness in our fellowship is insufficient preparation. It used to bug me. I go to conferences and I hear people kind of teasing, like, yeah, I just worked on my sermon, on the plane on the way here, threw together some thoughts. And I'm like, dude, each of our members are putting $300 out just for their conference fee.
Wow.
Flying all the way here to hear you, praying, some fasting for your lesson. And you whipped it together on the plane, and you're proud about that? I didn't understand it. I mean, I really struggled. As a young leader, I really struggled. I should have said something, but probably would have been fired back in the day if I would have. I had pride in my own heart, too. But it is a weakness. It's a weakness. So, I wrote down, this, it's due to a few reasons as I think about, myself included, and I think about our fellowship. I think, one, we overcompensate from the denominational world.
Right.
That we look at the denominational world and we scoff at it and we go, oh, all they do is preach on Sunday. That's all they do. They spend the whole week putting together their sermon. They're out of touch and they're unrelatable. And, we don't need to do that. We live our preparation. We can just stand up and preach the word. And I get that. And there's certainly truth to that. At the same time, they fill up stadiums. They bring in tens of thousands. And I'm not saying those guys are all going to heaven. But I'm saying, when was the last time your preaching filled up tens of thousands of people? There's something to be said. And I'm not saying let's all imitate them, cancel all your appointments, and work on your sermon all week. Okay, don't hear me saying that. But I'm saying let's not just kind of overreact to the denominational world as well. There's things we can learn from them. I think another reason, we're prideful. We think we don't need the time.
Come on, bro.
I remember hearing this back in the day, that there was people in this one church, I'm not going to say names, but they would literally kind of boast about how right before they get up to preach, that they hadn't figured out what they were going to preach on.
Wow.
And some of you will know who these people are, but they'd say like, I'm just going to get up. Yeah, I don't need to prepare at all. Yeah, I don't need to prepare at all. I don't understand it. They just get up there and they think they didn't need the time. I think, and they're gifted people. That's sometimes what can fake you out, is you're really talented. You have an ability to captivate an audience, but that's not the same. I think another reason, we're naive, and we think that all the power is only in the Word. We can quote Isaiah 55, which is cool. My word will not return to me empty, but will accomplish the purpose for which I sent it. That's awesome. There's no doubt about that. I cling to that when I know I did a terrible sermon. Don't you? You're like, oh, the word's not going to come back in. I love that. You got to have Bible in there. There's no doubt. That's the weapon. That's the power. It's God's word. We're not the power. There's no doubt. But come on, don't be naive. They spoke so effectively that a great number have believed. Jesus had to be trained what to say and how to say it, even though he's the living Word of God. Don't be naive. I think another reason, we're busy and we misprioritize. No, I didn't have time to work on the sermon because I was sharing my faith with a guy out there. Yeah, well, there's 150 man-hours right here. What's that worth to you? You could have impacted 50 visitors in this room. If you wouldn't have shared your faith with that guy, it would have worked on your sermon.
Wow.
And again, I'm not saying don't share your faith with that guy. Hey, John said don't share your faith with a guy. I'm just going to sit in my office working on my sermon all week. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying we misprioritize at times. And I think another reason, we're just lazy.
Come on.
It's hard to sit down. In the ministry, you got to set your own schedule, which means we kind of don't like being the sit down and just work behind the desk people. I mean, it draws people that go, let me bounce around, and we're all little ADHD and stuff. And to sit down for hours and do research and write and prepare, that's hard sometimes. We can be lazy and just not want to do that. And then I think a final thing I add in here, I didn't have this in your original notes. We don't know how to focus our preparation time. So we sit down and go, okay, I'm willing to spend the time. Now what? I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fill the time. And so we don't know how to invest the time because we don't know in what way we're going to invest it. And that's what I want to go into now, is what is included in preparation. What's included in preparation? Well, just, as you look kind of in general, it's first creating the whole concept. And we're going to get through this in much more specific detail as we go through this, but it's creating. There's a whole creation side. You're creating a sermon. What are you trying to create? What's your theme? What's your main message? There's creation time. That takes a lot of time, creating what am I going to preach on in this upcoming week. That's where I feel a lot of pre-sermon stress. Oh no, what am I going to preach on? You know that feeling? You got to constantly be thinking for weeks to come. What are you creating? I love to have a little page in my phone where I just have like sermon ideas, and I'm listening to a song or reading something in a book, and I come up with a cool idea. That's my creation page. Just write it in there. It takes time to create. And I can't sit down and create. That's got to be kind of as I go create. So I just like to have, creating, then studying. Once you've created, then you go, I'm going to study. I want to study all about this. I want to be an expert in this. I want to know so much more than I'm telling my audience. My preaching professor used to say, brethren, he'd say, like a doctor, the patient is not entitled to everything in the little black bag. but they know there's a lot in there if they needed it.
Right.
So the doctor only pulls out, take this medicine, take this, but they know there's a lot of security because he's got his black bag.
Yep.
In the same way, you've done so much study about a topic that you're only sharing a little bit, but people go, wow, that guy knows a lot about this. It helps studying, outlining.
Right.
We're going to go through that in detail. It's a huge weakness. Writing, scripting, preparing, word choice, refining to get it down, to really get it to where it's memorable and it's going to stick and it resonates, to being a wordsmith, refining and rehearsing, preparing, getting it down to where you can really be comfortable. It can come across real and relatable, not wooden and stiff. I mean, these are all the things that take a lot of preparation. So how much time in preparation is enough? People ask me that all the time. How much time is enough? And I always just say, it's more than you think.
Yep.
Whatever you think it is, it's more than you think. Spend more than enough and scale back. Black out more than enough. And then just go, I'm just going to fill it with rehearsal. I'm going to fill it with refining.
Wow.
I'm going to fill it with rewriting. That's the best way to start, is more than enough, rather than, oh man, I'm scrambling and I didn't budget enough time. Practically, it's so difficult to quantify, as everybody's different. We all have different backgrounds, we have different experiences, different education levels, different talent levels, different audiences that we're preaching to. For me right now, as 51-year-old John Lusk, this is for me. For a normal Sunday, if I'm doing a normal Sunday sermon, I budget 6 hours for working on the lesson. That's just an average, 6 hours. For a class series, if I'm doing a midweek class like on Philippians or something like that, or if I'm doing an expository Sunday series, it's 8 hours. That's a good average, 8 hours per Sunday. 8 hours per midweek. It takes a lot more deep study. For an epic lesson I mean like doing something at a conference, an ILC, an ICMC or something like that, like a big group keynote kind of a lesson. It's minimum 30 hours. I can look at most of the ones I've done, like ICMC last year. Any ICMC people, or 2012, was it two? I don't know, it was in St. Louis. That one, or 2013, St. Louis, Get Fit, Don't Quit, did that. That took me that's probably 50 hours of working on that.
Wow.
ILC, years before, 2012, was on Matthew chapter 6, had this expository challenge, which I loved. Seriously, that was pushing probably 75, maybe 100 hours, counting all the different commentaries and stuff I read. But I want it to be something that people go, I remember that from 3 years ago. I just think they came, I want to give them something. That's what you want to do, not arrogantly. I want to feed God's word to people. So epic lesson, at least 30 hours. And then Keynote adds an additional 2 to 5 hours, based. Sometimes it can be more, sometimes a little less, but adding a slideshow too, it takes a lot more. In my earlier years, I would easily double that. I remember 6 hours for my first Bible talk that I was done with in about 20 minutes. It was just like, they're like, is that it? I'm like, yep, that was it, I'm done. But I remember spending 6 hours for that first Bible talk, for the first sermon I had. I got this opportunity on Sunday night. They break you in on Sunday night back in the day, because I was 2-a-days. Remember that in the mainline church? It was 2-a-days. And Sunday night, it was a little more casual. They're like, let's have the young guy preach on Sunday night. I remember working on that, 25 plus hours on my first sermon. I go, I just wanted it to be awesome. So think about your preparation. Think, how much time are you really investing in your preparation?